My father cleared his throat, raised his glass, and looked directly at the high-profile guests seated around our formal dining table. "We are so proud of my oldest daughter, a corporate executive," he boomed before his eyes coldly slid over to me. "And then there's my youngest. She's the family disappointment. We try not to talk about her career." The room went dead silent. My sister smirked, and my father smiled proudly, waiting for the polite chuckles to follow his cruel joke. But before anyone could breathe, the most powerful man at the table, a highly decorated 4-star general, stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the hardwood. My father's smile froze as the general locked eyes with me, snapped a flawless, crisp military salute, and said, "Ma'am, it is an honor to stand in the presence of a true hero." My dad nearly dropped his wine glass. Before I reveal what happened next, follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my voice has reached. My name is Emily Thompson, and I am 32 years old. To the outside world, and especially to my own flesh and blood, I was the invisible daughter, the sibling who just couldn't seem to get her life together. For the past decade, while my family built an absolute empire of corporate success and social status, I intentionally kept my head down, letting them believe whatever twisted version of reality made them feel superior. In my father's eyes, my existence could be summed up in a single, painful label: the ultimate family failure. My older sister, Vanessa, was the golden child who checked every single box on my father's meticulously designed list of achievements. She graduated top of her class from an Ivy League university, secured a vice president position at a Fortune 500 company before turning 30, and dressed in tailored designer suits that practically screamed wealth. I, on the other hand, supposedly worked as a low-level unaccomplished data entry clerk for a vague government subcontractor. I lived in a modest apartment, drove a beat-up sedan, and wore simple, unassuming clothes to our rare family gatherings. My father routinely treated my life as an embarrassing secret, a stain on his perfect family portrait that had to be hidden from his wealthy friends. But what he didn't realize was that my quiet, ordinary life was a carefully constructed cover story. I let them live in their arrogant delusion because the truth of my secret career was far more dangerous than they could ever handle. The tension in the air was palpable the evening our family gathered at one of Sacramento's most exclusive restaurants. It was the rehearsal dinner for Vanessa's upcoming marriage to Robert, a man whose lineage was steeped in prestige and high-ranking military tradition. Robert's father was none other than General Samuel, a legendary 4-star general whose name carried immense weight in Washington circles. For my father, this dinner wasn't just a celebration of love, it was the ultimate networking event, a golden opportunity to cement our family's social standing among the nation's elite. I arrived late, slipping into the private dining room wearing a simple, off-the-rack navy dress. The moment my mother spotted me, her eyes narrowed in disapproval, scanning my minimal jewelry and practical heels. Vanessa immediately glided over, pulling me aside with a tight manicured grip on my arm. "Don't embarrass your sister tonight, Emily." My dad snapped, his voice a harsh whisper as he suddenly appeared beside her, cutting me off before I could even say hello. Robert's dad is a 4-star general, and this night needs to be absolutely flawless. Just sit at the end of the table, stay quiet, and try not to mention your little clerk job. I stayed quiet, offering nothing more than a calm, neutral nod. They genuinely believed my presence was a liability, terrified that my lack of corporate glamour would ruin Vanessa's big moment. Little did they know the powerful man they were so desperate to impress was the exact reason I was in the room. As the multi-course dinner began, the atmosphere in the private room grew thick with my father's desperate sycophancy. Snorts, he spent the first hour completely monopolizing the conversation, aggressively sucking up to General Samuel by bragging about his own business acquisitions and Vanessa's recent corporate promotions. Vanessa sat beside Robert, smiling radiantly, basking in the heavy praise while my mother nodded along like a proud queen. I sat silently at the far end of the long mahogany table, completely marginalized, content to watch the theatrical display unfold. But my father couldn't just let me sit in peace. His arrogance required a punching bag to make his golden child daughter look even more spectacular. During a brief lull in the conversation, he intentionally shifted the entire room's spotlight directly onto me. He cleared his throat loudly, raised his wine glass, and looked across the table with a patronizing smirk. "We are so incredibly proud of my oldest daughter, Vanessa, who is a brilliant corporate executive," he boomed, ensuring every guest was paying attention. Then, his eyes grew ice cold as they slid down to my end of the table. "And then, there's my youngest, Emily. She's the family disappointment. We try not to talk about her career because, frankly, entering data into a computer isn't much of an achievement." The words cut through the room like a physical blow, laying bare the deep contempt my family held for me. My mother softly sighed, and Vanessa shot Robert a knowing, amused look, completely validated by my public humiliation. My father smiled proudly around the table, waiting for the polite, elitist chuckles to follow his cutting joke. He thought he had successfully put me in my place in front of the military elite. The room fell into a suffocating dead silence. My father stood there, glass raised, a self-satisfied grin plastered across his face as he waited for the guests to join in on his mockery. But the laughter he expected never came. Instead, the atmosphere shattered instantly when General Samuel completely ignored his pandering toast. The highly decorated four-star general stood up from his chair so violently that the heavy wood scraped loudly against the polished floorboards, drawing every eye in the room. My father's proud smile instantly froze. He blinked in utter confusion as General Samuel didn't look at him, nor at Vanessa, but locked his piercing, military-sharp eyes directly onto me at the far end of the table. Without a single word of hesitation, the general brought his right hand up to his brow, executing a flawless, razor-sharp military salute right there in the middle of the crowded dining room. The sight left the entire room absolutely paralyzed with astonishment. "Ma'am." General Samuel's powerful voice boomed, cutting through the thick tension like a blade. "It is an absolute honor to stand in the presence of a true hero. I had no idea you were the daughter of this household." Snorts, my dad nearly dropped his wine glass, his hand shaking so violently that the red liquid swirled dangerously close to the rim. Vanessa and Robert sat frozen, their jaws literally dropping in absolute shock as the general stepped away from his place of honor. He walked past my stunned family, extended his hand to me with profound respect, and made it clear to everyone that the woman they despised was actually someone of immense national importance. My father sputtered, a nervous, high-pitched laugh escaping his throat as he desperately tried to regain control of the room. "General, I think there's been a massive misunderstanding," he stammered, gesturing toward me with a trembling hand. "Emily is just a low-level data clerk. She handles simple administrative paperwork for a subcontractor. There must be another Emily you're thinking of." General Samuel's expression hardened into pure granite as he turned a cold, commanding glare toward my father, instantly silencing him. "I know exactly who she is," the general barked, his voice dripping with authority. "Your daughter is Major Emily Thompson. She is a highly decorated intelligence officer who operated deep within high-threat territories. 2 years ago, when an entire platoon under my command was ambushed and completely cut off from communications. It wasn't a corporate executive who saved them. It was Emily." The room seemed to tilt as the general detailed my tactical brilliance, explaining how I had single-handedly coordinated a high-risk extraction protocol under heavy pressure, bringing every single soldier home alive. Snorts, he made it brutally clear that my low-level civilian title was a strictly classified cover story required to protect national security. Vanessa's face drained of all color, and she stared at her lap in absolute humiliation. Robert, an active duty captain himself, looked at me with wide eyes of sheer reverence, realizing he was sitting at the same table as a military legend. The toxic family hierarchy they had spent decades building shattered completely in a matter of seconds, leaving my father standing in the ruins of his own arrogance. I slowly stood up from my chair, the heavy silence in the room pinning my family to their seats. I looked at General Samuel and gave him a respectful, appreciative nod. Thank you, General, I said, my voice calm, steady, and carrying a weight that none of them had ever heard before. The honor was entirely mine. Then, I turned my attention to the head of the table. I looked directly at my father, whose face was still a mask of pale shock, and then at Vanessa, who couldn't even bring herself to meet my gaze. The petty insults, the years of being pushed into the shadows, the deliberate humiliation from moments ago, it all felt incredibly small now. The false image of a daughter deemed a failure had completely evaporated, replaced by the reality of who I truly was. I let you believe I was a disappointment because my work required discretion, I said quietly, ensuring every word resonated through the quiet room. But tonight, I realized something else. I never needed your validation, Dad. My worth was forged in places you would never have the courage to step foot in, alongside people who actually understand the meaning of loyalty and sacrifice. I picked up my small purse, looked at Robert and his family with a polite smile, and turned away. I walked out of that exclusive dining room without looking back once, leaving my father and sister to sit in the suffocating wreckage of their own shattered arrogance. Reflecting on that night now, at 32 years old, I realized that walking out of that room was the moment my true life began. Today, I am fully recognized in my field, working openly as a senior strategic advisor, and I am completely free from the toxic need to please an ungrateful family. My father tried desperately to call and text me in the weeks following the dinner, his messages filled with sudden pride and awkward apologies, but I never answered. He didn't miss his daughter. He just missed the prestige he could have leached from my success. Vanessa's wedding went on, but the dynamic had permanently changed. Robert's military family treated her with a polite distance, knowing how she had treated a decorated officer of the Republic. I chose my path because I wanted to serve something greater than myself, not to collect empty corporate titles or win a superficial family competition. By snorts, letting go of their validation, I gained an unshakable sense of self-worth that no cruel comment could ever diminish. The girl they once dismissed as a failure is gone forever, replaced by a woman who stands tall in her own truth. Now, I'm curious about those of you who have listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever had your family completely underestimate your worth? Comment your thoughts below. Meanwhile, snorts, I am leaving 2 other incredible stories on the screen that will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until the very end.